Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere a little unusual. You're drifting, not walking, into a place where the floor rocks beneath your feet, and the walls creak not from age, but from current. This isn't a boat, it's someone's living room. We're visiting the Philippines, but not the resorts or volcanoes you've seen in glossy travel magazines. Nope. Tonight, we float toward an island village where entire houses perch atop bamboo rafts, tied with fraying rope to mangrove roots or swaying lazily in the tide like oversized lily pads. The air smells like brine and smoked fish, and the only way in is by paddle or motorized banca, those slim outriggers that skip over the water like nervous crabs. Children run barefoot across wobbly wooden planks, connecting the floating homes, balancing like circus performers. Chickens cluck nervously as their coop sways. A dog dozes on a porch that isn't quite facing the same direction it was this morning. And the strangest thing? This is normal. You probably wouldn't survive this. One solid gust, and your entire Airbnb would be halfway to the South China Sea. But these folks, they've adapted like mangroves, rootless, flexible, salty, and remarkably chill. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it by you? Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice as you glide up to the village is that nothing looks fixed. No concrete, no fences, no grid of streets. Instead, you're greeted by a landscape of platforms, some patched with old plywood, some made from slick banana wood, floating calmly on brackish water. It's not just one or two homes like this. It's all of them. The community hugs the edge of a sprawling river delta, where fresh water meets sea, and the tides sneak in every few hours to rearrange the scenery. This village, called Tagnawan, looks like something from a Miyazaki film. Fragile, floating, improbably charming. You half expect a flying fish to offer directions. Each house here sits atop a floating base made of thick bamboo culms lashed together. Bamboo is the hero here. Not just any kind, but Kawayang teak, a hardy local species known for its stiffness and buoyancy. These bundles are dried, stripped, and sealed using methods passed down from grandfathers who didn't have YouTube tutorials. Then comes the platform. Treated wood, salvaged doors, anything flat enough to support a life. Walking on these platforms feels like standing on a giant waterbed. Each step sends a wobble outwards, which returns to you a second later as a reminder. You are not on land. One misstep, and you're feeding the catfish. The homes themselves are charmingly chaotic. Corrugated iron roofs rusted into patchwork patterns, woven nipa walls riddled with tiny holes that let in breeze and the occasional mosquito, and ropes tied around corners like seatbelts. Atop the roofs, solar panels. Just one per house, usually, but enough to power a bulb or charge a mobile phone, if the village isn't drifting too far inland to lose the sun behind the mangroves. These people aren't rich. Most are fisherfolk, crab trappers, or shell gatherers. Yet there's a serene rhythm to the way they live, a kind of floating patience. They wash dishes by lowering a bucket into the water. They plant vegetables in hanging baskets. They eat meals on the porch as the entire house bobs to the rhythm of the tide. A woman sits on her deck weaving a fishing net. She doesn't glance up when you pass by. Not because she's rude, but because the village is used to being watched. Government officials, missionaries, NGO workers, they all come and gawk for a day. Then they leave. But you're staying tonight. You're not just looking, you're listening. You hear the creak of wet bamboo tightening as it dries in the sun, the slap of laundry hitting wood, a baby cries, a rooster crows, completely unaware of time zones. The smell of grilled tilapia drifts across the water. It's somehow both smoky and sweet. You're not even hungry, but your stomach makes a noise anyway. Welcome to Tanyaon. Scientifically, this setup is fascinating. The homes are designed to float just above the waterline, where they avoid major resistance from waves while still being high enough to remain dry during high tide. The density of bamboo and the volume of air trapped inside it provide just enough lift. The houses are light, and most heavy furniture is avoided. No pianos, no bathtubs, not even proper beds. Just hammocks and foam mats that can be rolled up when the floor shifts. And it will shift. Scholars still argue about when and why this style of housing began. Some say it dates back to pre-colonial times, when Austronesian seafarers brought over raft-based lifestyles. Others insist it's more recent, a response to increasingly violent storms and unstable land tenure. Whatever the origin, one thing's certain: these homes float because they must. Occasionally, a house breaks loose. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, the reaction is startlingly calm. A group of uncles in baseball caps and no shirts will hop in a canoe, paddle after the rogue house, and tow it back with surprising speed, usually before the owner even notices it's missing. There's even a bit of dark humor in how they talk about it. One man jokes that his ex-wife took the house and the tide. Another brags that during last year's typhoon, he didn't move an inch, though the latrine floated off and hasn't been seen since. Life here requires a constant awareness of movement. The tides come in and out like a lazy roommate, and while the houses might seem peaceful, they're not passive. They breathe, they adjust. They ride the edge of land and sea like skilled surfers. You lie back on your mat in your borrowed hut, lulled by the gentle creek and lapping below. There are no hard angles here. Even time seems to bend, slower and curvier, like the meanders of the delta itself. One last glance at the ceiling shows a spider weaving its web directly overhead. You're not sure whether to admire it or politely suggest it move out. But the breeze is warm. The house is rocking gently. And for the first time in a while, you're not entirely sure what day it is. And that's okay. From your sleepy spot on the bamboo floor, you begin to realize something strange. The village looks different. Not drastically, but the angles have shifted. The chicken coop that was directly across from you at sunset is now a few meters to the left. A clothesline that was taut and square is now sagging diagonally. And that floating home with the red plastic bucket out front, it's further away. No, you're not dizzy. The village moved. Welcome to one of the only communities on Earth where everything is untethered, on purpose. In most places, you'd call it a disaster if your house shifted in the night. Here, it's a survival strategy. Tanyawan doesn't just float, it flows. During typhoon season, the village becomes semi-nomadic. Instead of fighting the wind and water like a concrete blockhead, it dances. Locals untie their homes from their usual moorings and let them drift inland, away from storm surge. Sometimes they even hitch together into loose clusters, forming makeshift archipelagos of safety. It's basically Waterworld, if Kevin Costner had brought snacks and a banjo. When the storm passes, the community floats itself right back, like memory foam, but wetter. The technique sounds whimsical, but it's deadly serious. The Philippines is pummeled by an average of 20 typhoons each year. Some are mild. Others rip trees out of the ground like weeds. Most land-based communities brace for impact by shuttering windows and sandbagging doorways. But for a floating village, the playbook is different. Mobility, flexibility, and a hefty dose of bamboo engineering. Imagine waking up and deciding, you know what? Let's move the house 5 meters to the left today. I want a better breeze. That kind of casual decision-making is common here. Some families have even gotten so comfortable with their mobile existence that they unmoor seasonally, following the fish or avoiding the salt water creep that kills their potted plants. You paddle beside one such house now. It's mid-morning. The sun is high, the air thick. Inside, a grandmother stirs coconut milk on a charcoal stove that leans slightly with the tide. The grandkids lie on the bamboo slats, arguing over who gets the last banana fritter. A radio crackles. Bad reception as usual. The house shifts ever so gently to the right. The dog lifts its head, unimpressed. You call out, asking how often they move. The grandmother smiles and says, "Only when the wind tells us to." It sounds poetic, but there's some science in it too. Prevailing winds in this region change direction subtly throughout the year. So does the salinity of the water, especially during monsoon runoff. The villagers don't need sensors or barometers. They smell it. They feel it in the creak of the wood. They see it in the behavior of the herons that perch on the porch rails. Scientists still argue whether this type of semi-nomadic floating lifestyle counts as settlement or mobility. One anthropologist wrote that these communities blur the boundary between permanent residence and environmental drift. Another said, they live in the present tense, but anchored to nothing. One critic even questioned whether it was a form of passive displacement or brilliant ecological adaptation. In other words, no one agrees. But the villagers don't care. They're too busy adjusting their ropes. Rope management is an underrated skill here. Each house has multiple mooring lines, some tied to mangrove trunks, others to wooden posts embedded in the muddy shallows. These aren't standardized or color-coded. They're often made from recycled nylon, twisted palm fiber, or frayed marine rope that once held shrimp nets. They're adjusted daily, sometimes hourly, depending on tide level, wave height, and household mood. One man calls his ropes his steering wheel. Another refers to them as the handbrakes of his house. A teenager laughs and says, "They're just my mom's excuse to make me do chores." But those ropes are no joke. During a recent storm, a poorly tied house broke loose and rammed into a neighbor's latrine. No one was hurt, unless you count the neighbor's pride. The boy responsible is still teased. They call him Captain Collision. It's not always so lighthearted. In one memory shared over a bowl of dried squid, an elder recalls a storm so violent the whole village had to evacuate inland, abandoning their homes to the water. When they returned days later, the village had scattered. Some homes were lodged in trees, One had traveled over 3 kilometers upstream and was found with a goat still tied to the porch, chewing calmly. You drift further now, to the edge of the community, where a few newer platforms sit half-constructed. Here, a small team of men and boys are building a new home. They pass bamboo culms hand to hand like clockwork, testing each one with a foot stomp or a hard rap to check for hollowness. They're not using nails, just rope, knotwork, and intuition. You watch as they lash crossbeams together, using an odd rhythm. 2 tugs, twist, pull. It's oddly hypnotic. One boy sings under his breath. Another holds a soda can between his teeth. There's laughter, but no blueprint. Just muscle memory and a silent agreement that the house must float and keep floating. The bamboo will last about 10 years if treated well. Every 2 or 3 years, they'll replace a few culms, much like changing tires on a car. Except instead of a garage, you've got a canoe full of tools and a mangrove tree as your workstation. You pause. The breeze picks up slightly, brushing your skin with salty fingers. You feel the platform beneath you tilt, not alarmingly, just enough to remind you, this is not solid ground. And maybe it doesn't need to be. Because in a world obsessed with foundations, concrete, career paths, character arcs, this village reminds you that there's power in being untethered, in gliding with the current instead of pushing against it, in learning, as the villagers do, that sometimes the safest thing you can do in a storm is float. You wake up to the sound of something rhythmic and hollow. Clack, clack, clack. It's not a drum, not exactly. As you peek outside, blinking into the soft light of a pinkish dawn, you spot the source. 2 men bouncing lightly on opposite ends of a long bamboo pole, testing its flexibility before slotting it into a half-built raft. One of them notices you watching and gives a lazy wave. Just another day in Tanyaoan, and it starts with bamboo. This isn't just wood, it's the backbone of the village. And not just metaphorically. Literally, every home here floats on bundles of it. Not logs, not pontoons, not plastic drums. Bamboo. A miracle grass that grows faster than most people can walk and holds enough air inside its chambered stalks to keep an entire house afloat. The building process is equal parts tradition and improvisation. The rule of thumb: the bigger the house, the more bamboo you need. And always pick the dry season harvest when the sap's low and the weight's right. You don't want soggy culms. Those are for benches, not buoyancy. Each bundle is arranged in a crisscross pattern, allowing water to flow through while still holding the structure steady. Between layers, locals pack coconut husks, which help with insulation and prevent mold. It's like nature's bubble wrap. And it smells kind of nice too, if you're into that sort of thing. The homes are secured to their platforms with what might look like a chaotic mess of rope and knots. But look closer, and you'll see it's not chaos. It's choreography. Every line has tension. Every knot, purpose. There's even a local saying, if your knots are lazy, the sea will eat your sofa. That one doesn't translate perfectly, but you get the idea. You spend the morning following a man named Kuya Lando, who's repairing his cousin's raft. He's barefoot, his toenails dark with river silt, and he's got a machete that looks like it's opened more coconuts than you've had hot meals. With each chop, slice, and lash, he explains what he's doing. Not that you understand every word, but the gestures speak volumes. He points at a lopsided beam, too soft. Another that cracks when stepped on, too dry. Then he finds the right one, whacks it clean, and hums as he works. The hum is off-key, but comforting. The materials aren't fancy. Most of them are salvaged. Old fishing nets, tarpaulins from political campaigns, discarded ropes from cargo boats. There's even a half-melted traffic cone nailed to one corner for visibility. Every home has its signature accessory. One family has a wind chime made from cutlery. Another, an old jeepney license plate nailed over the door like a house number. Nothing matches, but everything works. A geographer once described these floating houses as vernacular architecture in flux. That's academic speak for stuff that looks weird but works anyway. Scientists still argue about whether this style of building should be classified as amphibious or purely aquatic. One school of thought insists that because they're often moored, they're semi-terrestrial. Another argues that movement makes them vessels. One even tried to categorize them as fluvial dwellings, which sounds fancy, but mostly just confuses people at cocktail parties. You decide it doesn't matter. A house is a house, even if the floor rocks and the fridge is a floating styrofoam box filled with river-chilled soda. While following Lando, you also learn a few quirks about construction timing. Bamboo's best harvested during a waning moon. Why? Well, some say the tides pull moisture out. Others claim spirits are less active then and won't curse your home. Either way, no one cuts bamboo on a full moon. That's just asking for a haunted raft. You help haul a few culms from the riverbank. They're heavier than they look, slick with algae and dotted with barnacles. A tiny crab scuttles off one as you lift it. You apologize. The crab does not care. When the raft frame is complete, it's floated into the open water and weighted down slightly with big, flat stones. Not too many, just enough to simulate the weight of furniture, people, and the occasional wayward goat. Then comes the patience part. For 2 days, the bamboo is allowed to settle, adjusting to its new aquatic environment like a teenager refusing to get out of bed. If it warps too much or sinks unevenly, adjustments are made. More floaters added, weight shifted, and finally, the floor is laid. Narrow planks of wood nailed or tied across the top, like a giant sushi mat. You step onto the finished platform and feel it give slightly under your weight. But it doesn't sink. It bounces back, resilient and forgiving. You can see why people like it here. It's not rigid. It responds. It holds you, but only just. Like a friend who doesn't hug too tightly. And then, of course, comes the big test. Fire safety. Every house here uses open flames for cooking. That's not ideal on a wooden raft. So each home has a designated fire corner, usually built from cement blocks or metal sheets scavenged from old boats. Water buckets sit beside every stove. Children are trained early to spot smoke. It's not foolproof, but it's efficient. And honestly, the last fire here was put out with a bucket of leftover coconut water. The chickens were mildly alarmed, but otherwise, no damage. You round off your lesson with a coconut in hand, fresh cut and shockingly cold. It was stored in the shade, half submerged in river water. Tastes like salty vanilla and sunburn. As the sun rises higher, the raft shimmers underfoot. A dragonfly lands on your wrist, stays a moment, then flits off. The river breeze carries voices. Someone's calling for lunch. Another is laughing. Someone else is arguing about a borrowed paddle. And just beneath your feet, 100 stalks of bamboo hold up an entire life, Afternoon heat settles over the village like a damp towel, and you start to understand why no one moves quickly here. It's not just the humidity, it's the floor. Every motion sends a ripple through the house, so you learn to tread softly, speak gently, and sit down slowly unless you want your soup sloshed across the room. Life on a moving floor is part balancing act, part surrender. You follow Ate Mira, a mother of 3, as she prepares lunch in her kitchen, which is in fact just one corner of her open-plan raft home, separated by a curtain and a small shelf full of spices and plastic toys. She's got a pot of rice on a single-burner gas stove, and she's expertly shifting her weight with every stir. The stove sits on a scrap metal frame bolted to the platform and wedged with pebbles to keep it mostly level. The trick, she tells you, is never to leave the pot unattended, because if a boat passes too close or a strong breeze hits, lunch might end up in the river. Today's meal is dried fish fried crisp and dipped in spicy vinegar, served with a green mango slaw, and for the kids, an alarming amount of ketchup. The smell is intoxicating, smoky, sweet, sharp enough to make your eyes sting. She laughs when you cough. Too strong for you, visitor. The house sways. Again. And she casually grabs the pan midair as it threatens to slide. Her 6-year-old doesn't even flinch, just keeps drawing a shark on a piece of cardboard. You, on the other hand, are holding on to the nearest rope post like it's a lifeline. Over lunch, you learn the secret to wobble-free living: core strength and zero attachment to flat surfaces. There's no table, just a low bamboo mat and small bowls held carefully between knees. Every action is deliberate. Pouring water, passing food, even scratching your leg requires balance. A toddler waddles by, dragging a plastic jug like a pet. His older brother uses his flip-flop to swat a mosquito midair. None of them fall. You, however, almost do when you stand too fast and the raft dips slightly. Mira grabs your elbow. You move like you're on land, she teases. You ask if it's hard to live like this. She shrugs. Only when I'm pregnant. Then I get seasick in my own house. The movement becomes background noise after a while, like the ticking of a clock or the hum of a fan. You start to recognize the signs. A low thud means someone tied up their boat on the side. A high creak says the wind shifted slightly. A sharper dip means one of the kids just cannonballed off the edge for a swim. During calmer afternoons, Mira takes naps in a hammock strung across the living area. The breeze slips through the woven bamboo walls, and the whole house rocks like a cradle. It's not hard to see how people sleep deeply here, even if the occasional splash or cough breaks the silence. There's something profoundly soothing about being gently nudged by water all day. And yet, there are complications. When you ask about rainy days, Mira frowns slightly. We have buckets everywhere, and extra tarps. Sometimes the roof leaks. Sometimes the whole house leaks. Repairs are constant. Every week, something warps, snaps, or molds. If it's the floor, they patch it. If it's the supports, they swap out bamboo. If it's the roof, well, tarps are cheaper than galvanized sheets, and umbrellas work surprisingly well indoors. You help Mira retrieve a basket of laundry from the sun-drenched porch. The clothes smell like river wind and detergent. She folds everything with practiced speed, even as the porch lists slightly under her weight. The chicken coop to the left is tied to the side of the house with a pair of bungee cords. One of the hens inside squawks, offended by a passing dragonfly. There's a casual chaos to everything here. Dogs nap beside laundry lines. Children dangle their feet into the water. A fishing net dries on the railing, and a basketball floats lazily by, untethered and ignored. Yet no one seems alarmed by the wobbling world they live in. It's just home. The architecture makes it all possible. Most walls are woven from amakan, a lightweight panel made of split bamboo or palm strips arranged in a zigzag pattern. These flex slightly during wind gusts, but don't snap. Roofs are mostly thatch or sheet metal, patched with everything from plastic signs to rice sacks. If it keeps the rain out, it counts. One particularly clever home has its cooking area slightly recessed, like a sunken pit lined with gravel. This keeps spills contained and stabilizes the stove. Another has tied milk jugs along the perimeter for extra buoyancy. It looks silly but works brilliantly. There's even one guy, you spot him napping in a hammock, who claims his house hasn't moved in 3 years. Anchored like a jealous husband, someone whispers nearby. Scientists still debate how sustainable these floating homes really are. Some call them ticking time bombs for climate disasters. Others point to their adaptability and minimal environmental footprint. The truth is, they're both fragile and brilliant, highly vulnerable, yet designed to adapt, like sea creatures that evolved legs just in case. Before you leave Mira's home, she hands you a warm lump of rice wrapped in banana leaf and tells you to eat it when you're hungry later. It's a gesture so simple, it tightens something in your chest. This is a place where people have nothing, but still offer more than they keep. As you climb back into your borrowed canoe, the house gently tilts one last time under your shifting weight. Mira waves from her kitchen, still barefoot, still smiling, as the bamboo slats rock beneath her like a lullaby. And once again, you think, this isn't survival, it's choreography. The sky is still a gentle gray when the fishermen leave. You hear them first. Soft paddles slicing the still water, a few murmured instructions, and the occasional clink of metal as anchors are checked or nets unrolled. No engines, just muscle, tide, and the kind of silence that only happens before sunrise. Here, fishing isn't a job you commute to. It's a sidestep off your porch. The men don't launch from harbors. They launch from breakfast. Most homes have a narrow wooden canoe tied right to the front door, bobbing lazily like a pet waiting to be walked. Step outside, untie the rope, and you're at work. You trail behind one group, the village slowly disappearing behind you as the mangroves thin out. It's barely light, but the fish are already moving. The estuary pulses with life. Schools of tilapia dart between roots. Waterbirds squawk indignantly from overhead branches. And somewhere to your left, something large splashes once, then disappears. Let's hope it was a dugong. The boat rocks gently beneath you. You're with Kuya Nestor, a wiry man with leathery hands and a perpetual sunburn. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's with purpose. Fish today, maybe not tomorrow, he mutters, casting a net with a practiced spin that fans it out like a silk umbrella. His house floats maybe 50 meters from here. He often drifts back and forth while fishing, letting the current carry him close enough for lunch, then back out again. I catch better near my son's house, he says with a grin. He has good karma, maybe from not eating all his snacks. Fishing here is tactile. No sonar, no depth finders, just hands, eyes, and instinct. Nets are mended with old thread. Weights are made from scavenged bolts and stones, and bait is often just a crushed crab and a prayer. Today, the catch is modest. A few slippery silver fish, one with an extra fin. Nestor eyes it. Keep it. Extra fin is luck. You decide not to ask if that's science or folklore. It's probably both. As the sun rises, you realize there's no sense of hurry. The men drift in clusters, chatting, laughing softly, occasionally pausing to smoke or drink coffee from thermoses wrapped in old socks. It's not laziness, it's rhythm. The tide controls the day, not a clock. A few women are also out, balancing in wide, flat-bottomed canoes that carry woven baskets filled with crabs and river snails. They wear wide-brimmed hats made of pandan leaves and don't stop paddling even when they wave. Back near the village, you watch a father and daughter fishing off the side of their house. No boat, no gear, just a stick, a line, and two toes hooked around a railing for balance. The daughter yells each time something nibbles, whether it's a fish or just the tide tugging back. You ask if they ever lose fish to bigger predators. Nestor nods gravely. Barracuda sometimes. Once, a shark ate the net. He mimes it with wide eyes and chomping hands. Big net. Gone. Wife made me sleep outside. He laughs, but you suspect it really happened. Scientists still argue about how overfishing, climate change, and upstream pollution are reshaping estuary ecosystems like this one. Some say the fish stocks are collapsing. Others claim the locals have adapted faster than the science can keep up, switching species, changing seasons, following instinct over data. The truth is murky, like the water beneath your boat. One thing is certain. This kind of fishing, this low impact, daily dance with nature, leaves fewer scars. No industrial trawlers, no ghost nets that drift for decades, just handmade lines and the occasional broken paddle, which, by the way, Nestor once replaced with a flip-flop nailed to a stick. It worked for a whole week. He points out his cousin's house floating nearby. It's currently unmoored and drifting slowly in a lazy circle. He forgot to tie the rope, Nestor says with a shrug. Again. That cousin is currently standing on the porch, drinking coffee, completely unfazed. You learn that sometimes drifting is intentional. Some fishermen untie their homes and let them float closer to deeper channels where the catch is better. They anchor temporarily, sleep there for a few nights, then drift back, like aquatic Airbnb hopping. The kids think it's an adventure. The mothers think it's a hassle. There's even a running joke that if your house drifts away from your in-laws, it means the spirits approve of your marriage. If it drifts closer, someone better make an offering. By late morning, the boats begin to return. Not all at once, but in a slow trickle. Fish are cleaned right on the side of the raft homes. Guts tossed to the river. Heads saved for soup. Cats appear, seemingly from nowhere. One even leaps from a canoe mid-drift onto a porch with the precision of a ninja. The homes rock, slightly with each arrival. You watch as ropes are retied, nets are hung to dry, and paddles are stacked like firewood. Some houses have drying racks built into the sides, fish strung on loops like garlands, scales glinting in the sun. You eat lunch with Nestor, rice, grilled fish, and pickled seaweed. It's tangy and crunchy, and tastes like the ocean got a degree in fermentation. He offers you tuba, a fermented coconut wine. It's fizzy, slightly sour, and might be responsible for how relaxed everyone is all the time. You ask what he'd do if he couldn't fish anymore. He shrugs. Float somewhere else, I guess. It's not just a line, it's a philosophy. Because in this village, mobility isn't just about typhoon season or curious fish. It's a lifestyle, a mindset. Homes drift, fish migrate, tides shift. Nothing stays fixed, and that's okay. Maybe that's what makes it so soothing to watch. No harsh engines, no concrete barriers, just the endless, deliberate rhythm of a place that knows it can't control the water. So it decided to live on it instead. School starts at 8 a.m. Give or take 10 minutes, depending on the tide. You sit on the edge of a floating porch, watching the morning commute unfold. No school buses, no car horns, just a slow procession of tiny canoes wobbling through the estuary, each carrying one, sometimes two kids in freshly pressed uniforms and backpacks wrapped in plastic bags. You half expect one of them to whip out a megaphone and shout, "Next stop, homeroom." Instead, it's mostly silence. A few paddles splash, a sibling bickers, someone sings off-key, and the houses, like quiet spectators, bob gently in the background. You follow a girl named Laika, aged 9, with a fierce ponytail and a paddle taller than she is. Her canoe is barely wider than her shoulders. She pushes off from her family's porch with all the confidence of someone who's been doing this since she could walk. Her little brother rides up front, hugging his lunch container like a life raft. They paddle past half a dozen floating homes, each launching their own little academic fleet. Some of the canoes are handmade, shaped from hollowed logs or plastic barrels. Others are patched with fiberglass or creatively reinforced with plastic bottles along the sides. One girl even has a cartoon drawing of SpongeBob on the hull, probably done with marker, but no less official. The school itself is on land. Barely. It sits on the closest firm patch of ground, reachable by a winding creek in a well-worn landing dock that groans every time a group of children step onto it. The dock leads to a cluster of buildings with corrugated roofs, mango trees swaying over the courtyard, and a flagpole leaning slightly to the left as if it's tired too. Laika and the others park their boats along the muddy edge, tying them to driftwood stakes like horses outside a saloon. The scene would be comical if it weren't so beautifully functional. One older boy, in charge of canoe patrol, makes sure no one's boat floats off during math class. He takes his role very seriously. He even whistles. Inside the classroom, it's chalk dust, wooden desks, and ceiling fans that may or may not work. Uniforms are damp. Hair is frizzed. Pencils have teeth marks. And yet, the kids sit up straight, answering questions, reading aloud, practicing multiplication tables, as though they didn't just row themselves to civilization. Their teacher, Miss Ramira, is in her early 30s, wearing a floral blouse and flip-flops. She teaches 5 grade levels in one room, depending on who actually makes it through the tide that day. Some arrive wet. Some forget their books. But they all get here eventually, she says, sipping from a thermos. When you ask her what the hardest part is, she doesn't say logistics or funding. She says, convincing them to stay when the fishing is better. Because here, school competes with survival. During peak crab season, kids skip class to help bait traps or paddle messages between boats. In rough weather, classes are canceled not because the building's closed, but because the students can't safely cross the water. There are no snow days, but plenty of wave days. And yet, education persists. Students who graduate from the local primary school often continue at mainland high schools, traveling longer distances, sometimes even boarding with relatives inland. Some go on to college. Some become teachers themselves. One even became a marine biologist, which is hilariously fitting for someone raised on a floating house. Scientists still debate how these amphibious childhoods affect development. One study claimed that kids raised on the water have better spatial awareness and balance. Another insisted they suffer from chronic vitamin D deficiency and high dropout rates. Both are probably true. You try reading about gravity while bobbing in a canoe and see how long your attention span lasts. After lunch, Leica shows you her favorite reading spot, a narrow beam that juts off the back of her house like a diving board. She lays belly down with her feet kicking in the air, a paperback book wedged between her elbows. Sometimes it falls in, she says casually. Then I wait for it to dry. She points out fish darting beneath the raft, naming them like Pokemon. That's tilapia, that's kanduli, that's just a leaf. You try to tell the difference. You fail. She shrugs and flips the page. The family's small whiteboard hung near the cooking area displays a schedule, chores, study time, and something called radio hour, which you later learn involves listening to educational programs broadcast for remote communities. It's charming, until the signal cuts out every time a boat passes by. There are no desks in Leica's house. She does her homework on the floor, knees up, flashlight between her teeth. The paper crinkles from humidity. Her handwriting curls slightly from the damp. But the work gets done. Mostly. Her mother insists on it. She can fish any time, but read, that's harder to teach. And it's not just school. The village has its own informal lessons. Kids learn knots before they learn algebra. They can tell tide direction by watching foam patterns. They understand wind shifts better than most sailors. One boy knows how to use mangrove roots to trap shrimp. Another can steer blindfolded using only current and paddle rhythm. It's not in textbooks, but it's knowledge just the same. Of course, not every kid thrives here. Some dream of cities, escalators, elevators, floors that don't move. Others want phones, fast food, and air conditioning that doesn't smell like fish. But even the most restless ones tend to stay at least until they've learned the tides by heart, until they know how to ride a canoe without spilling their lunch. You end the afternoon watching the boats return, their painted hulls reflecting the pink-orange haze of sunset. The children tie up, peel off wet uniforms, and shout jokes to one another as they hop from canoe to porch. One slips, lands with a splash, and is immediately rescued by 3 giggling friends. No one yells, no one panics. It's just part of the commute. And as the light fades, the floating homes rock slightly with the laughter of kids who paddle to class, and somehow manage to do it with grace. By now, the sky's lost its golden shimmer. The breeze sharpens slightly. Somewhere, deep in the mangroves, the birds have gone quiet. That's when the whispers begin. Not the spooky kind, though give it time, but the practical ones. Quiet voices pass from porch to porch. One man unties a line. A woman folds up a laundry line and ducks inside. You notice extra ropes being checked, tightened. A few houses are pulled closer together, moored in clusters. The water is still calm, but the air is waiting. A storm is coming. Not a typhoon yet, but close enough to make this entire community flinch like an old scar. Here in Tanyon, weather isn't background. It's destiny. One sharp gust can mean a broken roof, a sunken porch, a house flung downstream with a goat and 3 laundry baskets aboard. So when the wind shifts, so do the people. And this is where it gets incredible. They move. Not away from the village, not into bunkers. They move the entire village. It starts slowly. One house detaches from its mangrove mooring and drifts inland, pulled by 2 men in a canoe. Another follows. Then another. Homes clumped together, like a defensive herd of floating buffalo. Ropes thrown from one porch to the next, knotted to poles, tied to tree roots, sometimes just looped onto big rocks. No central plan, no formal leader. But somehow, it works. You stand on a drifting platform, trying to make sense of it all. One woman hands you a coil of rope and says, "Hold this." Before you can ask why, you're pulled slightly sideways. 3 kids are towing your platform toward the nearest inlet, grinning like pirates on recess. This isn't an evacuation. It's a migration. By dusk, the houses have rearranged themselves into a crescent along the edge of a swampy inlet protected by high mangroves. It's quieter here, calmer. The trees buffer the wind. The water's shallower. The smell of mud replaces the usual brine, but no one complains. They've done this before. The community even has a name for it, pagilig. It loosely translates to the leaning, as in leaning into the wind, leaning toward protection. Or, as some interpret it, leaning into the inevitable. They don't move every storm, only when the signs feel right. Scientists still argue about whether local weather folklore has merit. Some believe villagers notice changes in bird behavior, cloud texture, or even the way dogs behave before a storm hits. Others dismiss it as coincidence. But as one old man tells you while retying a tarp, science is good, instinct is faster. You believe him. During these migrations, roles shift. The younger ones handle the paddling. The elders manage logistics. Who ties up where, how close to moor, which trees are safest. The mothers handle supplies. Water jugs, rice, lanterns, batteries. Someone has a 2-way radio. Another has a crate of dried fish labeled Typhoon Stash. As the night sets in, the wind does arrive. Gusty, but not violent. Rain comes next, tapping gently on tin roofs, then harder. You listen from inside one of the houses, knees tucked under you, as the storm builds overhead. The whole house rocks slightly, not from waves, but wind pressure. Yet it holds. The bamboo bends. The ropes stretch, groan, then settle. No one panics. A teenage boy plays a guitar under a tarpaulin. A woman fans her baby with a flattened biscuit box. 2 cousins argue about who forgot the matches. Someone's boiling sweet potatoes over a sheltered flame, and the smell makes everyone feel better. This is resilience, you realize, not as a buzzword, but as a routine. The wind howls once, a long whistle through the mangrove canopy. You peek out. The houses are snug now, moored like siblings. One is slightly tilted. Another has tied banana trunks to its sides as shock absorbers. A third has a clothesline flapping wildly like a pirate flag. And then, calm. By midnight, the storm has passed. The moon glows faintly behind receding clouds. Rainwater drips from eaves. Someone starts to sing, softly, a lullaby about a boat made of coconut shells. No homes are lost. A few nets are tangled. A makeshift ladder floated off, but nothing serious. The children sleep through it. The older ones pretend not to look proud. The younger ones beg for snacks. You help retie a loose rope, your hands clumsy but earnest. One girl watches and nods in approval. You feel like you've been initiated, and it hits you. These aren't houses that survive storms. They ride them, not by resisting, but by adapting, shifting, sliding, responding like reeds in wind. Their movement isn't weakness, it's wisdom. There's something strangely comforting about it. Most people spend their lives building things to stay still. Foundations, routines, whole cities of stone. But here, movement is safety. Flexibility is strength. Tomorrow, the homes will drift back to their usual spots, realigned like puzzle pieces, and life will resume. Fishing, cooking, arguing, laughing, but tonight, they rest together, quiet and swaying. A floating village that knew exactly when to move and exactly how to survive. The storm left behind a world rinsed clean. You wake to an eerie hush, not silence exactly, but a softened version of the usual sounds. No creaking bamboo, no flapping tarps, just water, still and glossy, stretching in every direction like a mirror too shy to reflect anything clearly. And then, plip. Something moves. You lean over the side of the platform. Ripples expand slowly as a tiny boat glides into view, carrying two figures with headlamps and long poles. The light from their lamps cuts a silver path across the water. It's just past 4 a.m. Moonlight hangs like breath over the mangroves, and in that dimness you see it. A pair of glowing red eyes, just above the surface, watching. "Crocodile," says the man beside you, in the most casual voice imaginable. He's chewing dried betel leaf, wearing a sarong, and not even pretending to be nervous. "Small one," he adds, as if that helps. This is Tanyawan's unspoken truth. The waters are shared, and not always by things that say hello. The locals live beside saltwater crocodiles, not in panic, not in cages, but in coexistence. They know where the nests are. They know when not to swim. And they've all got a story that starts with, "One time, my uncle." You float with a small patrol, men and older boys who check the area for movement after every big storm. Their poles aren't for fishing this time. They're for nudging debris out of the way, checking for damage, and gently persuading reptiles to leave if necessary. The eyes vanish beneath the surface. One man taps the side of the canoe with his paddle. That was a warning. If it wanted us, it wouldn't blink. Not exactly comforting, but okay. As the light grows, so do the sounds. Frogs croak from the banks. Kingfishers flash through the air like electric darts. A family of herons watches from the twisted roots of a mangrove tree, necks tucked in like folded umbrellas. The world is returning to itself. You drift toward the edge of the inlet, where families are beginning to emerge. Porch doors open, people yawn, laundry lines are rehung, and somewhere a child is already crying because someone else ate the last banana. The crocodiles, they usually keep to the deeper channels. The villagers have their own term for the uneasy truce, sabayan. It loosely translates to coexisting while pretending you're not nervous. A kind of shared denial pact between apex predator and person cooking rice over open fire. Still, precautions exist. Small children don't play unsupervised near the water's edge. Canoes are checked for teeth marks. Seriously. One guy shows you a chunk taken out of his outrigger last year. "Didn't hear it, just felt his tip," he says. Then we paddled fast. There are other nighttime visitors too, less sinister, more annoying. Jellyfish that ride the brackish water in slow, stupid elegance. Mosquitoes that form miniature tornadoes at dusk. And ghost nets. Ah, the ghost nets. After storms, the community watches for them. Drifting fishing nets, lost or abandoned by industrial boats further out. These tangled webs of synthetic mesh are nearly invisible in water, yet strong enough to trap fish, birds, turtles, sometimes even canoes. One young man named Paolo recalls getting caught in one while paddling back from a night trip. Felt like seaweed at first, he says, then it pulled. He freed himself by cutting the lines with a rusty can opener, and now keeps a pocket knife tied to his wrist. Everyone nods when he says this, like it's basic wisdom, because it is. Scientists still argue about how to manage ghost nets. They can drift for months, even years, becoming death traps for anything unlucky enough to meet them. Some say biodegradable nets are the future. Others say retrieval efforts need to improve. In Tagnawan, the villagers don't wait for policy. They cut, burn, repurpose. One ghost net now serves as a hammock. Another became a garden trellis. You helped drag in a half-sunken net this morning. It's heavy with mud, chin twigs, and one confused crab. A boy volunteers to keep the crab. Name him Captain Lost, he says, grinning. There's laughter, but also quiet frustration. The nets aren't just dangerous. They're a reminder of bigger boats, bigger economies, bigger problems out beyond the mangroves. The villagers here are not blind to the world. They're just very good at working around it. And sometimes, working together means moving closer. Literally. During cleanup mornings like this, houses are paddled side by side. Planks are laid between porches like floating bridges. A kettle is passed. So is gossip. Apparently, the woman 3 houses over caught her husband sneaking dried mangoes from the typhoon stash. He denies it, but everyone knows. One kid starts chanting, "Mango thief, mango thief," until his mother hushes him with a slap of a damp rag. Even the dogs gossip. They bark only at boats they don't recognize. You paddle toward the far edge of the inlet, where an older man lives mostly alone. His house is smaller, simpler, and surrounded by plants and floating baskets. Taro, lemongrass, chili. He greets you with warm suman, rice cooked in banana leaf, and points out the trails of bubbles near the far shore. Tilapaya school, he whispers, or crocodile. Either way, don't swim. You take his advice. As morning fades, the inlet becomes a kind of floating plaza. Repairs continue. Lines are untangled. One house, off balance after the storm, is gently tipped by 6 laughing men until its platform resettles evenly. Another family patches a hole using melted plastic, a flattened can, and a prayer. And all the while, the water glistens, shifting gently beneath the village like a cradle for 100 quiet dramas. Floating life means being vigilant, but it also means letting go. You cannot dominate the tide. You cannot banish every creature from your backyard. You just live with it, coax it, respect it, and occasionally mutter, "Please don't bite me," under your breath. Tonight, when the waters go dark again, and the red eyes reappear just for a second, you won't scream. You'll nod, like the others, and go back inside. Because this is not just survival. This is Sabe, and it's a lesson the city forgot. You wake to the sound of laughter. Not the restrained kind, but full, gut-clutching hilarity. It echoes over the water, bouncing between houses like a warm ripple. As you sit up, bleary-eyed and slightly sunburned, you catch the unmistakable scent of roasted fish, vinegar, and something sweet, maybe coconut sugar, you're just in time for a party. Today is Fiesta ni San Rafael, one of many floating feast days in the village. No need for a church hall or banquet center. Here, the celebrations happen on water. Entire homes are scrubbed down, ropes are tightened, and makeshift bridges of wooden planks are laid between neighboring houses to create what's essentially a floating cul-de-sac of joy. The preparation is a sight to behold. Women crouch beside open cook fires, fanning coals with woven palm fans. Kids haul buckets of shellfish, giggling as one escapes across the raft. A goat, clearly annoyed at all the fuss, bleats once and knocks over a bucket of ginger. No one is mad. It's Fiesta Day. Each household contributes something: grilled catfish, steamed crabs, sweet sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves, and the crown jewel, lechon manok, whole chickens marinated in lemongrass, calamansi, and soy, then slowly roasted on bamboo spits over coconut husk embers. One man brags that his chicken has been marinating since last Thursday. His neighbor snorts. "I caught my chicken yesterday. She's still mad." Floating trays of food are passed from house to house, often on paddleboards, sometimes on inner tubes. Someone's grandma has transformed a styrofoam cooler into a dessert bar, filled with ice-cold sago drinks and chunks of jackfruit. You take one. It tastes like sugar and lightning. Soon the music begins. It starts with a single speaker, battery-powered, playing a warbly Tagalog ballad about lost love and rice fields. Then more speakers join in, some synchronized, others gloriously not. The result is a chorus of heartbreak, rhythm, and distorted bass. A boy dances on a porch beam. Someone throws him a pair of sunglasses. It's not clear why. The floating houses themselves become part of the scene. Their porches extend with bamboo walkways to accommodate guests. Plastic chairs are balanced on narrow ledges. Someone ties a hammock between two platforms, and two aunties immediately claim it for gossip duty. You're ushered toward a house where the festivities are particularly lively. A man with a ukulele sings a folk tune, changing the lyrics to poke fun at his sister's cooking. She laughs, throws a banana at him, and the whole house rocks slightly in agreement. The guests range from toddlers in sequined hats to toothless elders fanning themselves with plastic plates. One woman is wearing what appears to be a formal gown with rubber boots. She says she's the event's unofficial queen, and no one challenges her. Even the boats are decorated. Some have ribbons tied to their outriggers. One is covered in artificial flowers, complete with a cardboard crown at the bow. It's unclear whether this is a joke, an offering, or both. You're handed a coconut shell filled with tuba, that ever-mysterious fermented coconut wine, and told to toast the saint. You do, and immediately regret the sip. It tastes like vinegar mixed with cough syrup and adventure. But refusing would be rude, so you take another. As the afternoon heat swells, people start to drift, literally, from house to house. Guests clamber across planks and paddleboards with plates in hand. You watch as one house unties completely and floats slowly toward the music. Pulled gently by two teenagers holding opposite ends of a clothesline. Scientists still argue whether such festivals count as urban gatherings in geographic studies. Some say they're a continuation of pre-colonial riverine traditions. Others view them as post-disaster social resilience mechanisms. The villagers themselves have no opinion. They're too busy eating. At one point, a man paddles by selling ice cream from a cooler tied to a raft. His boat is named Ice Ice Baby. His jingle, Just him yelling, "Cold, cold," while ringing a spoon against a pot lid. He sells out in under 15 minutes. Children cannonball from porches into the river, their laughter turning the estuary into a floating playground. Someone inflates an old car tire and turns it into a carousel, spinning toddlers until they're dizzy or wet, or both. Then comes the boat parade. About 10 homes break formation and paddle in a loop, music blaring. People waving flags made from old rice sacks and recycled election banners. Some boats hold altars, others karaoke machines. One simply has a man dressed as a giant crab who waves solemnly as he floats by. You ask if this is religious. A woman shrugs. Half saint, half party, then adds, mostly party. It's not chaotic. It's choreography, with laughter. There's a rhythm to it. Guests rotate, dishes refill, hammocks creak. The boats sway just enough to keep everyone alert and mildly buzzed. As the sun starts to dip, the energy softens. Songs slow. The food turns to leftovers. The lechon is reduced to bones, and someone's passed out in a hammock with a spoon still in hand. The platforms begin to separate again, untied with soft goodbyes and floating waves. Some houses drift gently back to their moorings, tugged by sleepy paddlers who sing lullabies between yawns. Others remain clustered, content to rock side by side through the night. You paddle back slowly, your own raft wobbling under the weight of food and memory. The stars come out, bright and unbothered by the laughter below. And it hits you. This isn't just a village that floats. It's one that celebrates its instability. It throws a party on the edge of the tide and invites the whole neighborhood. Even the crocodiles, you imagine, are listening from the shadows, mildly annoyed at the noise. Evening falls like a curtain, fast and final. The fiesta has quieted to a gentle hum, just a few murmured songs, the crackle of dying coals, and the occasional splash as someone rinses off sticky rice plates in the estuary. You settle back onto your borrowed platform, toes dangling over the edge, and then you hear it. Did you hear what happened to Clara's pig? A voice floats in from the next house over, low and theatrical. Someone borrowed it. Again. A second voice gasps. Third time this month. That pig is practically a timeshare. Welcome to Tanya Wan's version of social media. Raft side gossip. With no Signal, no Facebook, and definitely no TikTok, word travels the old-fashioned way, via porch-to-porch conversation, shouts across the water, and the occasional floating rumor paddled from one end of the village to the other. It's delightfully analog. Tonight, you listen as the village's unofficial newswire unfolds in real time. Someone apparently saw a teenage couple drifting too close near the mangroves. Someone else claims the school is finally getting a new chalkboard, though this rumor has been floating for 2 years now, and everyone agrees that old Mangtoni's floating outhouse is definitely listing to the left. It turns out, floating homes don't just change position during storms. They shift subtly, all the time. Tides, ropes, boat wakes, even someone walking too enthusiastically across a porch can nudge a house half a meter. And when homes drift closer, people drift closer too. Conversations become casual, shared meals spontaneous. But proximity cuts both ways. Some villagers joke that you can measure how well neighbors get along by how tightly they tie their moorings. Happy neighbors? Houses almost touching. Feuding cousins? At least 5 meters of water between them, and maybe a row of water hyacinths as a passive-aggressive boundary. You ask a man named Dante how people handle arguments in such a fluid neighborhood. He grins and says, "Easy. You just float away until you stop being mad." Disputes here rarely last long. There's something about water that cools tempers. Maybe it's the fact that if your neighbor's roof blows off, you're probably the one catching it. Or maybe it's because sound carries so easily. So unless you want everyone knowing exactly what you yelled at your cousin about, it's best to keep the volume down. One time, a woman named Lilia got so annoyed with her sister-in-law that she floated her house to the other side of the village for a week. She came back eventually, but not before half the village placed bets on who would apologize first. It was the sister-in-law. The tide was on Lilia's side that week. The constant shifting also leads to the world's most unpredictable neighborhood layouts. A house that was next door yesterday might be 3 houses down today. There's no GPS here, just relational geography. Where's Kuyaran's house? Left of the coconut tree, 2 paddles past the chicken coop. Wasn't that Ena's house yesterday? Depends if she retied. Scientists still argue whether this qualifies as nomadic adjacency, a term one academic coined to describe proximity that's based more on choice and tides than permanent infrastructure. Another scholar dismissed it entirely, calling it just wet suburbs. No one here cares. There's also an art to selective listening. With open walls, soundproofing is non-existent. You can hear babies crying, roosters crowing, uncles snoring, and unfortunately, karaoke attempts that should be declared maritime crimes. But you learn to filter. Do you ever get tired of hearing everything, you ask? A teen girl shrugs. Only when my brother practices beatboxing. You hear it for yourself later. She's right. Despite the close quarters, privacy still exists. It just looks different. Sometimes it means drifting slightly further out in the evenings. Other times, it means stringing up a curtain. Or more often, just waiting until the neighbors fall asleep. There's a kind of social courtesy that develops in floating spaces. No one stares. No one lingers. Everyone knows they're guests in someone else's airspace. There's one couple, newly married, who float just a bit farther than everyone else. People call their house the honeymoon raft. It drifts near the mangrove fringe, bathed in privacy and mosquitoes. Some tease them for it. Others nod in quiet approval. A few suggest it's mostly an excuse to avoid chores. At night, lights come from solar bulbs, kerosene lamps, or sometimes candles in old beer bottles. The glow is soft, flickering, dreamlike. Voices carry low across the water, blending into the sounds of frogs, crickets, and the distant cloop of something slippery diving into deeper water. You notice how the homes themselves seem to settle at night. The rocking softens, the ropes go slack. Even the dogs nap in rhythm. It's as though the whole village exhales at once. Then someone shouts, "Whose boat is floating away?" A mad scramble ensues. 3 boys leap from porches, paddle frantically, retrieve a slowly spinning canoe. It belonged to someone's cousin's uncle, who immediately blames the rope and then offers everyone mangoes to make up for it. Crisis averted. Again. And as you lie back, watching stars wobble faintly in the water's reflection, you think about how much happens here between the ripples, the small dramas, the drifting walls, the porch-to-porch comedy. A community not just on water, but of water, flexible responsive, and always a little bit hilarious. Because when your walls can move and your neighbors can hear your dreams, you learn to live lighter, to laugh more, to forgive faster, and maybe to double knot your ropes before you go to sleep. You wake to soft chanting and the clink of bangles. The sun isn't even up yet, but already the village is stirring. Something's different. The air carries a hush, not sleepy, but reverent. You peer out and see it. A platform raft, larger than most, drifting slowly into view. At its center stands an altar woven from bamboo, palm leaves, and fresh hibiscus. Candles flicker inside reused glass jars. A statue of the Virgin Mary stands at the helm, tied with plastic flowers and faintly tilting. Welcome to Raft Church. In Tanyaoan, religion floats too. There's no fixed chapel here, no bell tower, just this, an altar that can be paddled to wherever it's needed. Some mornings, it docks on the east side. Other times, it drifts among the homes, tethered to whichever family is hosting the service. It's an unspoken schedule. The tides decide. Today, the raft is anchored near the center of the community. You watch as people climb aboard, barefoot and murmuring prayers. They bring food offerings, coconuts, eggs, dried fish, placing them carefully beside the altar, where they sway gently with the motion of the platform. Mass begins with a familiar phrase, sung softly over the water. Ema Naman, Suma Salangjit, Ka, our Father, who art in heaven. The priest, young, thin, wearing worn black pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled, raises his arms. Behind him, a child waves a palm frond to keep mosquitoes at bay. There is no organ, but someone plays a slow hymn on a keyboard powered by a car battery. It wheezes slightly on the high notes. No one minds. You take a seat on a neighboring raft, legs folded, ears straining to catch the words. The homily today is about endurance, about building your house on faith, not sand, or in this case, not driftwood. You half expect him to quote engineering statistics, but instead, he tells a story about a woman who lost her entire house in a typhoon and still insisted on sharing her last pot of rice with a neighbor. There's no collection basket, just a floating jug marked Donacion tied to a stick. A child paddles it around, politely nudging people's hands. You drop in a few coins and receive a toothy grin in return. After the sermon, communion is passed. The bread is regular store-bought pain de sal. The wine, grape juice in tiny plastic cups. One leaks. The priest shrugs. Still counts. What follows is less formal, but no less sacred. People linger. They share stories. They pass food. Someone unpacks a guitar. And soon, the raft is full of voices. Not quite in harmony, but certainly in agreement. You learn that this mobile faith isn't just about spirituality, it's logistical. Building a permanent church would mean losing space for homes. Or worse, building it on land prone to floods. A floating altar can go where it's needed, shelter where it matters. It's not about grandeur. It's about presence. Scientists still argue whether such expressions count as formal religion in census data. Some claim raft churches are anomalies, exceptions to organized practice. Others see them as proof of theological innovation. The priest, when asked, just says, "We believe, that's enough." He also officiates weddings. Once, a couple got married between two canoes. The bride wore flip-flops and a crown made of bougainvillea. The guests floated nearby, tossing petals, and for some reason, popcorn. You meet an elderly woman named Lola Seta, who serves as the village's spiritual consultant. She's not ordained, but people come to her for blessings, dreams, and occasionally herbal tea for stomach aches. She tells you the altar raft is also used during wakes. When someone dies, she says, we tie the homes close, bring out lanterns, and let the altar float among them, like it's saying goodbye to each house. She doesn't say it with sadness, more like a soft fondness, the way someone describes a song they haven't heard in years. You help push the altar raft later in the morning. It's lighter than it looks. The bamboo flexes underfoot, groaning slightly as it moves. The statue of Mary wobbles but doesn't fall. You guide it toward its next stop, a home that's just recovered from illness. The family waves you in. They've prepared boiled bananas and ginger tea. There's no rush. The raft stays as long as needed. Later, you sit on a shaded porch where a teenager is drawing on scrap cardboard with charcoal. It's a sketch of the altar from memory. I want to be an artist, he says, but my uncle says I should learn to tie knots first. You smile. He's probably right. In this village, faith and practicality are intertwined. Ropes get blessed. Boats get named after saints. Children learn to swim before they can recite prayers, but both are seen as necessary. Because sometimes the river tests you, and sometimes the only thing keeping your house upright is prayer and a well-tied knot. As night falls, the candles on the raft glow again. The platform rocks slightly, a cradle for hope. A woman nearby hums a lullaby to her child. Another adds a verse, and soon it becomes a floating hymn, a song for the sky, the water, and everything in between. You lie back on your mat, watching fireflies flicker across the mangroves like errant stars. The altar raft floats nearby, now tethered and still, but somehow it feels like it's watching, or maybe listening. And you think, faith doesn't need four walls. Sometimes all it needs is bamboo, candles, and the willingness to float. You've spent days floating, listening, tasting, and watching, but it's only now, sitting in a half-sunken canoe with a curious schoolboy and a notepad soggy from splash, that you finally ask, how does it all actually work? How do dozens of homes stay afloat through storms, tides, family drama, and gravity itself? Time to get nerdy. Your guide today is Thomas, aged maybe 11 or 14. It's hard to tell because he alternates between childlike squeals and confidently explaining salinity data like a junior oceanographer. His family calls him the scientist, and frankly, the title fits. He starts with the basics: buoyancy. It's Archimedes, he says, as if that name should immediately ring a bell. If the water pushed up is more than the weight pushing down, you float. He pokes the bottom of the canoe for emphasis, which only makes it wobble alarmingly. Air is light. Bamboo has lots of air. So bamboo floats. And it's true. Bamboo's structure, long, hollow chambers sealed at intervals, naturally traps air, giving it remarkable lift. Add that to its high strength-to-weight ratio, and you've got a miracle material. It's no wonder so many traditional cultures build with it. Each house here typically floats on bundles of 20 bamboo culms, depending on the size and cargo. That's enough to support a small family, their cookware, a pile of clothes, and usually a dog or two. But it's not just the bamboo. Coconut husks, wedged between raft layers, add insulation and prevent water from pooling. They act like natural sponges, soaking up excess moisture while still staying buoyant. Some families even tie plastic jugs or old water containers underneath for added lift, what Tomas calls disaster insurance. And then there's salinity. You paddle into an area where freshwater rivers meet the sea. The water is slightly murky, tinged brown with leaf tannins, but Thomas dips a strip of paper into it like he's testing pH at a science fair. More salt here, he says. That means you float better. But also, termites hate it less. Right. The trade-off. Salt water helps with buoyancy, but accelerates the decay of untreated wood. Fresh water is gentler on the house, but less supportive when floating heavy weight. Villagers make constant adjustments, replacing bamboo, shifting load distribution, balancing their homes like tightrope walkers with rice cookers. Some build double-deck platforms, one main raft, one smaller raft suspended just underneath for balance and emergency backup. It's basically a bamboo airbag. Tomas shows you one and insists his uncle invented the idea, even though 3 other families claim the same. You ask him how people learn all this. He shrugs. You watch, you try. If it sinks, you try better. He's not wrong. The community's engineering knowledge is passed hand to hand, knot by knot. No blueprints, no manuals, just observation and correction. And lots of wet pants. Scientists still argue about the best way to replicate these housing techniques in climate-vulnerable areas. Some urban planners believe amphibious housing is the future, especially in flood-prone megacities. Others claim it's too unstable, too unregulated. One Dutch architect once visited Tanyaoan and offered to install pontoons with GPS stabilization. They looked expensive, Thomas says, and very boring. He's got a point. The genius here isn't in complexity. It's in adaptability. You pass a home that looks suspiciously crooked. One side is dipped low into the water, almost kissing the surface. Tomas giggles. Too many sacks of rice on that side. You watch as the family slowly shuffles furniture toward the opposite corner, adjusting their weight like human ballast. Within minutes, the house levels out. No concrete, no jacks, just physics, patience, and a good sense of humor. Another raft has been rigged with empty oil drums along one side for extra support. Someone's clearly nervous about an upcoming family gathering, or they just bought a new sofa. One home has giant plastic barrels suspended beneath it, using motorcycle chains and seatbelt straps. It looks wildly unstable, but it's been floating for 6 years. The owner proudly refers to it as my yacht. You return to the center of the village, where ropes stretch like spider webs between houses. These moorings are crucial. They must be loose enough to allow for tidal movement, but tight enough to prevent collision. Most are tied to mangrove roots, which act as organic anchors. A few are staked to dead trees or posts hammered into the mud. Some use rebar from construction sites miles away, dragged here, floated in, hammered down with the bottom of a rice cooker. There's a constant tug of war between stillness and sway. Ropes fray, knots slip, homes pivot slightly over the course of a day. People learn to recenter constantly, not just physically, but emotionally. When your walls move, you get good at regaining balance. And here's the kicker. Most people here don't swim. You ask Tomas about this, expecting a confident splash and a demonstration. He shakes his head. Why would I need to? My house floats. You try not to look alarmed. Instead, you climb back onto the platform. mentally cataloging everything you've learned: buoyancy, density, material fatigue, airflow, friction, torque, displacement. You are now, unofficially, a floating architect, or at least a floating intern. As night begins to fall, you sit with Tomas and his cousins, eating roasted bananas dipped in brown sugar. The air is cool. A faint breeze nudges the platform. Somewhere, a rope creaks in warning. You know, Tomas says, between bites, people think we're poor. You glance around. At the patched roofs, the reused tarps, the plastic containers with mismatched lids. Then you look again at the laughter, the craftsmanship, the way every platform sways in sync like a giant sleepy heartbeat. They just don't get it, Tomas adds. We don't float because we have to. We float because we can. And in that moment, everything Archimedes ever said finally makes sense. It had to happen eventually. You knew, deep down, that the signal would find you. That somewhere, somehow, one bar of cellular reception would sneak into your peaceful, analog paradise and remind you that the world beyond Tagnawan still spins, scrolls, and shouts. It arrives subtly, a faint ding, then another. You glance down. 2 messages, 1 weather alert, and an email asking if you've had a chance to review the spreadsheet. You sigh, and so does your bamboo house. Literally, a gust of wind causes the whole structure to creak in agreement. Yes, tourism has arrived, and with it, Wi-Fi, sort of. It started small. A few backpackers with GoPros and waterproof phone cases, tagging their coordinates and calling this place undiscovered, despite the 700 people already living here. Then came a group of eco-volunteers who left behind a solar charger and 2 broken flip-flops. Now, there's even a laminated sign near the mangrove dock that says Welcome Center, though no one mans it, and it's mostly used to dry laundry. Today, a canoe glides past carrying 3 young travelers, matching dry bags, sun hats, and expressions of delighted discomfort. One is vlogging, the other is swatting mosquitoes, and the third has just realized his portable speaker is out of battery. You're tempted to applaud. You paddle over to the village's new guest raft, a slightly sturdier platform with a bamboo bench and a hand-painted sign that says, "Sit here if you like rice." Tourists love it. They take pictures. The locals chuckle. The rice is very average. You meet Marielle, one of the first locals to offer homestays. Her house is tidier than most, with carefully labeled hooks for guest towels and a laminated rules sheet taped to the wall. Don't flush the toilet. Don't scream if it moves. It's supposed to move. No romantic scenes after 9 p.m. The walls are very thin. She's booked solid for the next 3 weekends. Backpackers want authenticity. And apparently, authenticity includes mosquito bites, limited power, and learning to gut fish at 6 a.m. Some are surprised by the lack of internet. But it says, online, there's 3G here, a confused tourist once said, holding their phone aloft like a divining rod. Mariel had pointed to the river. Try out there. Sometimes it works if you stand on 1 foot. The village handles visitors well. Everyone's polite, curious, amused. They know the drill. Tourists appear, snap photos, ask awkward questions, and leave. One guy even brought a drone. It spooked the goats and nearly tangled in someone's laundry line. The footage was beautiful, though. But tourism also brings tension. Not everyone wants their floating home turned into a photo op. Some don't like being told their way of life is so inspiring by someone wearing $300 water shoes. Others just want to hang their underwear without it appearing in someone's highlight reel. You ask Marielle if the money helps. She shrugs. Yes, but also no. The extra cash pays for school fees and solar panels, but it also drives up prices. Gas, rice, even the ferry rides to the mainland. Some worry it's changing things too fast. Others hope it brings better health care and real roads. One man jokes, maybe next they build a Starbucks on stilts. Scientists still argue about the effects of microtourism on small, vulnerable communities. One study claims it empowers locals and spreads awareness. Another warns that cultural commodification erodes traditions. The truth lies somewhere between an Instagram post and a long-forgotten canoe. The younger villagers are split. Some want in. They dream of starting kayak tours or floating restaurants. Others scoff. Let them float in their own homes, one girl mutters, shoving earphones into her ears, though they're not connected to anything. There's still no signal. There's talk of building a signal tower, but no one agrees on where it should go. One elder says it'll attract lightning. Another just grumbles. We've floated this long without Wi-Fi. Why break the streak? You hear rumors of developers, whispers about investors who visited nearby islands, measuring coastlines with suspicious interest. Tanyawan is too remote for serious infrastructure now, but that could change. Roads can be built. Deltas can be dredged. Even floating villages can be flattened and reimagined into eco-resorts with infinity pools and curated struggle. Marielle's worried. She's seen it happen elsewhere. First they love us, she says. Then they pave us. But for now, the rhythm remains. Tourists come and go. Canoes stay. The tide still decides what time dinner is. And the only notification that matters is when someone yells, "The fish vendor's here!" You paddle with one group of travelers as they try to take selfies without capsizing. A guide explains how the houses float. A Dutch girl raises her hand and asks, "But why would you live like this on purpose?" There's a long silence. Then Marielle replies, "Why do you live on the 6th floor with no mango tree?" Touché. You return to your own platform and discover the signal's gone again. Your phone is quiet. The spreadsheet is waiting somewhere far away. The light shifts. A breeze nudges your hammock. And you think, maybe some places aren't meant to be streamed. Maybe they're meant to be rocked gently, listened to slowly, and left mostly alone. It's your last full day in Tanyawan, and it hits you harder than expected. You wake up early, earlier than you mean to, as if your body knows it needs to stretch every second of this place into something permanent. The sky is a flat, silvery gray, just enough cloud cover to make everything feel hushed. Even the chickens seem less committed to their usual morning arguments. You paddle lazily around the outer edge of the village. By now, you know every crooked railing, every drifting chicken coop, every canoe with a SpongeBob face painted on it. It's all familiar now. It feels like it could be yours. If only you knew how to keep your balance when carrying a boiling pot of rice. But this morning, something else is on your mind. You pass by Lando, the builder, who's repairing the underside of a house with a giant piece of styrofoam and a flip-flop. You wave. He waves back, then yells, "The tide's going weird today." And there it is again. Weird. The tide hasn't been right for a few days. It comes higher, faster, lingers longer. The mangroves are soaked past their knees. and a few houses have had to raise their platforms by adding fresh bamboo underneath. The kids think it's funny, the elders, less so. Lando calls it pabigat na tubig, heavy water. He says it's been getting heavier every year. You paddle onward, this time with a tighter chest. Tanyawan floats, but it's not invincible. In the past 5 years, 2 nearby islands have seen their coastal homes washed out completely, not from storms, but from quiet, creeping floods, the kind that don't make headlines, the kind that nibble at bamboo until it gives way. One elder tells you the shoreline used to be 30 meters further out. Now the sea eats a little more each year. He taps a knot in his rope and says, the knots get stronger, but the sea gets smarter. Some of the villagers blame the weather. Some blame distant dams. Some say the fish are hiding because of noise from big ships farther offshore. Others say it's just nature turning the page. Scientists still argue about what's to blame. Rising sea levels, river siltation, groundwater extraction, coral bleaching, El Niño's cousin, or just time itself. One thing is certain, the water is changing, and so must the people. You meet Ate Mira again. She's drying fish on a rack near her porch, but the rack is tilted oddly, and the water laps at her feet. This used to be dry, she says, pointing to a damp wooden board now hosting a frog. Now I store the rice higher. There's talk of relocating. Not everyone, not yet. But a few families are scouting higher ground a few kilometers inland. The problem is, land costs money. And land comes with rules, permits, fences, taxes. Here the water is free, fluid, shared. Moving means changing everything. You overhear a teen say, if we go to the mainland, will we still float? Her brother laughs. No. There you fall. The threat isn't always dramatic. Some mornings, the tide just doesn't recede fully. It leaves homes damp, ropes sag, wooden planks warp faster, and when the storms do come, they come sharper. Last year's typhoon cut a swath across the nearby village of Panglet, sweeping away 8 homes. Some floated back, like wounded animals. Others never returned. You ask Marielle if she thinks Tanyawan will be here in 10 years. She pauses. The homes? Maybe. The people? Definitely. We float. That's what we do. But even she has started experimenting with new designs. Lighter roofs, stronger knots, pontoons made from recycled plastic bottles. There's talk of building a community raft, a kind of floating plaza where people can gather safely during high tide or emergency. It's still just an idea, scribbled on cardboard and passed around like folklore. You spend the afternoon helping a family rebuild their walkway, which collapsed during the last heavy tide. It's a simple job, tying bamboo slats together, bracing them with salvaged PVC pipe. But it feels like therapy. The water beneath you is calm, reflective. You try not to imagine it rising. Children paddle past on inner tubes, laughing too loud. A baby sleeps in a hammock. A woman hums a lullaby you don't recognize. Everything continues. And yet, you know something's shifting. Not just in the water, but in the people. The jokes are still there. The floating feasts, the gossip, the faith. But so is the planning, the quiet counting of days. No one says it outright, but you can feel the village preparing for a future where it might have to float somewhere else entirely. You watch the sunset from the roof of Marielle's house, a slightly tilted patch of corrugated metal with just enough room for 2 folding chairs and a bucket of warm beer. The light hits the water like a spilled candle. Everything glows. For a moment, even the plastic wrappers clinging to the mangrove roots look like art. I hope they don't come here with concrete, Marielle says softly. You don't have an answer, but you do have a deep, full appreciation of what it means to live with grace. Not despite the instability, but because of it. To love something so much, you let it change shape again and again. To loosen the rope, not to let go, but to allow the drift. And as the last light fades, Tanyaoin rocks gently under the stars, steady as a heartbeat, even as the future leans in like a tide that refuses to wait. Your final morning in Tanyaoan begins in the quietest way possible, with a whisper, not from people, but from the water itself. It laps at the bamboo gently, like it's saying goodbye. The sun isn't even up yet, but the horizon has already begun to soften. Hints of lavender and pale gold spread across the stillness. You sip a cup of instant coffee from a mug that used to say, "World's Best Dad." The lettering half scratched away. Someone gave it to you last night, insisting it was lucky. It is. The coffee tastes faintly of salt and smoke. And somehow, it's perfect. Around you, the floating homes are just beginning to stir. A dog stretches, paws thumping the planks. A rooster announces its opinion. A paddle slaps the water once, twice, then silence again. You drift along the edge of the village, this time slower than ever. Your mind tallies everything you'll miss. Mira's laughter, Thomas's bamboo lectures, the way kids tie their canoes with shoelaces and expect them to stay put. And then, for the first time, you realize you haven't once heard a car. There's no traffic here, no sirens, no streetlights, just the occasional distant putter of a fishing boat or the sharp whoosh of a bird winging across the mangrove canopy. Time feels elastic. Meals happen when the tide allows. Work begins with a nod, ends with a shrug. And the sky always shows up on time. You find yourself back on the guest raft, the one with the sign that says, "Sit here if you like rice." This time, you sit alone. The village is gently shifting around you, but no one is rushing. A small girl waves from a nearby porch, then paddles away on a raft made entirely of empty cooking oil bottles. This is your last float. You ask someone to take a photo of you, half embarrassed, half hoping you'll need it someday. The photo turns out wobbly and slightly crooked, like everything else here, but it captures the light and the water and the impossible calm. Back at Marielle's house, she's packing you a farewell snack. Sweet sticky rice in a banana leaf, and a boiled egg wrapped in paper. She also slips in a pebble. "For balance," she says, smiling. "Keep it in your pocket." It's not a tradition, as far as you can tell. She just made it one. When the boat arrives, a noisy aluminum thing with a cracked hull and a name you can't pronounce, you hesitate. The platform rocks as you step aboard. The village moves in your peripheral vision, as if it's shifting just far enough to avoid having to watch you leave. A few people wave. Not all. They're not a dramatic crowd. The boat coughs once and lurches forward. As the engine hums, the village begins to fade behind you. The colors blur. The platforms shrink. The mangroves reabsorb the homes like they were never there. But you know better. You know that under that calm surface is a whole network of lines, tied, untied, retied, knots full of tension and trust. And beneath the platforms, hollow stalks of bamboo still holding everything up. Not because they're rigid, but because they bend. And now, wind down. Final 300 words. The engine is long gone now. The river quiet. You're somewhere else entirely. Maybe in your bed, maybe still floating, maybe suspended in that half-dream where memory and story tangle together like ropes under a house. You can still feel it though, can't you? The sway beneath your feet. The way the floor moved ever so slightly when someone laughed too hard or stepped too quickly. The way every wall breathed with the current. You remember the taste of the fish, the heat of the sun on your shoulders, the sound of rain on a tin roof with no insulation, just sky above and water below. And more than anything, you remember how the people lived. Not in resistance, but in rhythm. Not building monuments to permanence, but crafting homes meant to move, drift, adjust, and return. In a world that demands stillness, they chose to float. In a time obsessed with foundation, they mastered the art of untying. And somewhere in your own life, you can feel it. That small tug, that permission to loosen your grip, to go with the tide, to trust that even if you drift, you won't disappear. Because sometimes survival looks like stillness, but sometimes it looks like bamboo. Flexible, light, strong enough to carry a life. Now close your eyes, feel the water below, and let yourself drift.